Hey guys, Balance Butt here, and today I want to do a part 2 of my patch notes discussion that I started last time. This might be 3 parts, we'll kind of see how long this actually takes, but I'm going to start with Ascendancies rather than going over the other gems. I just want to take a break from looking at gems for a second. So let's start right off with Assassin. I really like what they did with Infused Toxins, letting all damage can poison, and what they did with Mystical Infusion, setting your base critical strike chance for spells equal to the crit of your main hand weapon. I think these are 2 huge build rounds that are reasons you would take Assassin, but I think the issue is when you like spend 4 points on those, you a lot of times struggle to pick the other 4 points from your Ascendancy. Even with like a Bloodline, it's just he's just kind of awkward. He doesn't have 2 good 2-pointers you can take or other good 4 points you can spend. It's hard to spend enough good points on Assassin. And on top of that, while the Ascendancy does give you a shit ton of damage, this part of the tree just does not have much defense, making it even more unlikely that you actually want to choose this over something more defensive in this part of the tree like Pathfinder. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make Opportunistic a 2-pointer again. This is the 25% more single target damage and 35% reduced damage taken when there are rares nearby, like multiple rares nearby. This damage from your critical strikes cannot be reflected as flavor text and does nothing, just because you're never going to be crit capped 100% of the time. But I would like to make this a 2-pointer again. Assassination style, I think, can stay. I personally hate nodes like this. I just don't think they're very fun. For this is some like you're really powerful for 50% of the time, and then you feel miserable the other half of the time. I just don't like designs like this. But regardless, Opportunistic a 2-pointer, you can much more easily spend 4 points here, 4 points here, and then take Opportunistic and then spend 2 points in a Bloodline and be happy. Or even like spend your remaining points on Mistwalker to go a little bit faster or a little bit of recoup. It just makes it a lot easier to spend points in the tree. I want to buff Unstable Infusion. I think this is one of the worst charge generation Ascendancy nodes on the tree. Like Trickster, for example, he gets +2 frenzy charges as opposed to just +1. Deadeye gets more accuracy rating per frenzy charge, and then most of them are like that. Like Occultist gets AoE and damage per power charge. Juggernaut's closer to this, where his is just, +1 charge or whatever. But I think this node could be a little bit better since you have to path through it to get this, since this node is just so terrible. Like +1 charge is just not very strong in today's PoE. But what I would also like to change is so just getting 4 crit multi per charge, I think is pretty reasonable. That's like not going to be insane. Like even at 10 power charges, it's 40 crit multi, which is going to be quite a bit of damage, but nothing like completely broken. It's still like not a node that you're like completely stoked to travel through unless you are truly stacking a lot of power charges. Now, one thing that I would really like to change defensively is Mistwalker. Elusive used to be so much more powerful when you could constantly reset it with using Withering Step, but I think that is a little bit too powerful, and I can understand why that got changed. But I think if Assassin had a way to do it and no one else did, that would be like a unique defensive draw to this Ascendancy. That's something that's pretty cool. Like where I want to do it where it's just you can reset it when it's below 100%, just as in like you can't reset Elusive at all, but when you take this node, it would just say you can reset Elusive below 100%. It's possible that this 100% increased Elusive effect needs to go down for that, or the travel nodes needs to go down for that to allow this, because this is quite powerful, but this percentage that you could reset it at could be higher, could be lower. It's just like there's a decent way to balance this, but I think restricting this to just Assassin could be an interesting way for him to go defensively. Then I think 10% reduced damage taken while on Elusive could be just something that you have, like, so when your Elusive is off, you still get your DR, or if you're a build that couldn't have an easy way to generate Elusive, it's still something you could spend 2 points on and be weird, like you're spending 2 points in DR, like if you're a Trapper Mine build that cannot actually get Elusive easily, you could still get damage reduction at like a weird use case. I don't know. I think it just makes this notable just more interesting to build around. Deathmarked. I think, like I said in my Assassin video, I think this is the worst Ascendancy node in the game. I don't know if it. I think it's. I can't think of one that could ever be worse than this, but it definitely needs to be reworked. I thought initially what it was going to do was it was going to make Assassin's Mark at level 30 be like really good, but the reality is Assassin's Mark at level 30 is just like another 7 additional crit multi, which is just completely atrocious. You would never spend points on this. It making the mark free is just quality of life, doesn't really do anything. And then hits can't be evaded doesn't really matter against a unique, because I mean you need to be accuracy capped in your mapping anyway. So it's like not terrible, but point is I think they can make level 30 Assassin's Mark just get an additional 50 crit multi, or and like +5 to +0.5 to base crit, or some combination of crit multi of that, so it's actually justifiable to take, because right now you just wouldn't pick it. Something much stronger, but I think really cool option that they could do is they could make it so marks you inflict apply, this enemy takes +1.5 crit, and this enemy takes an additional 50 crit multi. Those numbers are probably way too high for what it's worth, but essentially, like if I snipers marked or poachers marked or warlords marked something, it would inherit that 1.5 base crit that Assassin's Mark normally gets, and then the crit multi that Assassin's Mark gets. It basically adds an Assassin's Mark to an existing mark in the way that, which is I think kind of thematic in what Elusive does. Like it adds, like when you take these Claw Masteries over here, that adds Elusive also grants 50% to critical strike multiplier that gets multiplied by your Elusive effect. Where like for example, if you add this to a mark, it would then get multiplied by mark effect like normal. Like if you take the mark nodes down here. So I don't know, something interesting I think they could consider doing there. Otherwise, I would rather them just remove it if they're not going to do some kind of buff to it, because it's kind of just a scam to take. I also would like to see another 10% chance to poison on the minor poison nodes here. I think 30% poison chance is pretty good here, but I don't think it needed to be nerfed. It used to be 40% on the Ascendancy, but getting generic poison chance, especially for spells, is quite difficult. So I think this is just like a reasonable balance thing. They could just make these 20 again to make it 40 what it was, but I don't think it's really going to hurt anything to make it easier for people to poison cap, honestly. Okay, moving on. And Assassin, for what it's worth, the defensive part, I know that this does not address at all, but I will get to that later with the tree changes I have. Okay, Sab. Sab is actually, to me, very similar to current problems that Assassin has, in that it's very difficult to find builds that you want to play on this over something else, and it's really hard to spend all of your points. So he's just so all over the place in the things that he does. Like for example, if you're a trap build and you're just like an AoE trap build, you really struggle. So you take Chain Reaction, take Pyromaniac, Born the Shadows, and then you have to be an area skill, or you have to be projectile skill, or you have to take a bloodline essentially for the remainder nodes, right? Like if you're a mind build, you take this, and then you're pretty much in the exact same spot where you have to be trapped. You have to basically be an AoE or proj skill to be Sab, which maybe is fine, but I think it could be opened up a little bit more. So Explosive Expert was a node that Sab used to have that was really good at this. It was just a generic 2-point node that you could spend that was usually I'd say a little too strong. I don't know, it's weird because it's like it was usually about like 25% more damage, but you generally had to play Skitterbots for a lot of archetypes because you get 100% crit chance, and you get 10 LE pen and then 40 crit multi if they were chilled, ignited, and shocked. Just based on those, each one would provide one of those effects. So I think adding that back would be good to make it easier to actually pick Saboteur and have enough nodes that you could take. But like, yeah, essentially this. I don't think it has to be that node exactly. I think there should be another good generic node that you could take, much like what Opportunistic used to be on Assassin when it was a 2-pointer. Okay, and then Perfect Crime. This might be too much, but honestly, Perfect Crime, so on triggered spell builds in particular, Perfect Crime is usually about 30% more damage, which is not exactly out of line for what a node should give for a very specific archetype. Like for example, like you'll see nodes that are just like 20 to 30% more damage, and then usually more damage if it's conditional or has a downside. Like Aspect of Carnage on Berserker is 40% more damage, but you take 10% increased damage and stuff like that. Like Far Shots is like 30% more damage on Deadeye, but you have to be really far away. Like there's just stuff like that. So I think that's fine that it doesn't have to have, because it comes with an extremely big hidden downside that isn't apparent until you actually play with it, and that's basically 100% more cost of skills or of triggered skills. Because if you're spending 1,000 mana a second triggering something, if you take Perfect Crime, you are now spending 2,000 mana, which, as we've mentioned, it is not very easy to sustain spells in current PoE, which I do think a blanket cost nerf to spells would help a lot. But I don't know that it's necessarily enough to overcome. I mean, I know it's not enough because this is a huge problem that you run into on Sab all the time. It doesn't necessarily have to be this big, and you run into it a lot less on Castle and Crit builds because Castle and Crit builds can get mana leech, but if you're like either Castable Channeling or some other kind of trigger thing that can't actually leech from attack damage, it is very difficult to sustain this. And usually, when I say it's very difficult, you go Eldritch Battery. That's like the thing you pretty much always will have to do. And my unrealistic hope for this node is probably not going to actually happen, but I would prefer, or I'd just absolutely love this to say trigger bots like trigger everything, that not just spells. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of Shockwave's not a triggered skill, but like basically triggered attacks or generic triggers that are, I can't think of generic triggers, but yeah, it would like trigger attacks like man, I'm totally spacing on. I know there are ones that I want to do, but it's like, of course, then I'm put in the spot, I can't think of them. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that'd be interesting. I don't think they would actually do that, but it's something cool that you could do. Chain Reaction. I don't know how to change this node. I think this node is kind of fine as is, honestly. I think it could be a little bit more interesting because it is quite boring. I think it could be either more area of effect or like I have it changed as 30% more area effect, 30 more prod speed. That is probably too high. It could probably go lower than that or stay as is. I think this node is reasonably fine, but this ascendancy is basically because they added the random projectiles returning you part to it. This ascendancy is basically either AoE or projectile skills. So I think adding another node that interacts with projectiles in some way, like maybe another node that does that as well, makes sense. Just because it's like this node just feels the return to you thing is just so random for the rest, because the rest of the ascendancy is basically AoE centric. Even the travel nodes are AoE centric, although technically there's 2 prod speed ones here. But anyways, and then demolition specialist. I would want to just add non-aura mines deal 15% more damage. The reason for that is so niche, but if you're using blast chain mine, or so like if you're using high impact mine, and if you're using normal mine skills or high impact mine, this node is very good, right? Or you're juicing your damage with something like Stormblast mine or Pyroclast mine. But if you're using something like blast chain mine, which is already weaker, or something like locust mine, you get no benefit from this, and you would really struggle to play a miner on this ascendancy because of that. So I think something very generic. And the reason I have non-aura here is because I don't want to further buff things that are already getting benefit from this. Like I don't want high impact mines to get a further buff. I don't want things like that. So this would literally just buff locust mines and blast chain mine. That's why I have non-aura there. Trickster. Now I do not think. Well, honestly, I do think this is probably controversial. I think Trickster does need a slight buff after the absolute gutting of 3.27. But I want Heartstopper to be removed or just do something else. I think this node is so bad and has been bad ever since it exists. You take it if you absolutely have to, and usually if you're trolling. But I would rather it just be a choice rather than just be a pendulum effect. People fucking hate pendulum effects for obvious reasons because it feels bad and you don't know when it's working. But I would rather just have it say a choice between take reduced damage over time or take less damage from hits. Probably doesn't need to be something like this, but literally anything else I would be happy with in Heartstopper, just because people don't like the way this feels. But if you want it to be defensive, I think you could make the condition a choice that you make rather than a choice that randomly happens to your character and feels like crap. Now, this will probably never happen, but I've been really high on a node like this for a while. I want a new notable behind polymath. This could be maybe somewhere else, but basically, when you choose a mastery, you take these 2 nodes. And when you choose a mastery, you can instead choose a different mastery from a different part of the tree, and then that converts the masteries on that node type to that one you take on the tree. Like for example, if I'm taking a life mastery here, I could then instead take a fire mastery. And then that would mean all the life mastery nodes I take further on the tree are then converted to fire masteries, and I can no longer take life masteries. But it essentially gives him a way to hop around the tree and take other masteries from other parts of the tree by ruining a node type on the tree that you take. It would cost an additional point to do this. So like instead of spending 1 point on a life mastery, I would spend 2 points on a fire mastery, and then Herbalism down here, and further life clusters would then change to fire. And I could do that with like change these nodes to staffs or something like that you're taking. It's possible that this is just too good or too much to code, but I like the idea of it. I think is very build enabling. Like you could take staff nodes, you could take like all kinds of weird stuff to enable things with a node like this. But that one again, I don't think necessarily is like a balanced thing. It's an idea I just think is very cool. Warden, I harp on this all the time. So Warden, just my preamble, Warden is generally the highest damage attack ascendancy in the game. That's almost always true. It's very rare that you find a case where that's not the case, unless it's like some really weird niche application you need some kind of ascendancy point to enable. But the reason Warden is not picked very highly is because it feels completely terrible to have to upkeep tinctures. We were allowed to automate flasks, and then we got tinctures added, which brought back flasks basically, and then Warden gets that even worse because you have to keep them up for your power and you have to give up 2. So basically, I just want to get rid of that problem. So Enduring Suffusion, I want to remove all the text on it. This is the one that says tinctures of fly, tinctures linger on you for 0.5 seconds per mana burn on you. Blah, 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 blah. Tinctures have 30% less mana burn rate. This is the node that basically lets you keep permanent effects of tinctures up at the cost of having to juggle them annoyingly. What I want to do is remove all that and then just say tinctures no longer inflict mana burn. Tinctures effects are always applied to you. 25% less effective tinctures on you while wielding a non-melee weapon. And then 15% less effective you on tinctures while wielding a melee weapon. Now, the reason I'm a little less sure on this one, I could be fine with this just saying tinctures effects are applied to you, 25% less effective tinctures on you. But what I wanted to experiment with is merging tinctures effect also apply to ranged weapon from Seasoned Hunter into this effect, and then just making the penalty for doing that just higher. And the reason for that is when you're if you're playing this Ascendancy as a range, you always take these 6 nodes, which is just kind of uninteresting to me. But it is. I could go back and forth. Like honestly, like I said, like I have here, I'm slightly concerned about merging the range tincture node into enduring suffusion. So it could always be moved back to a separate node in a future patch, or just stay as a separate node. I'm honestly fine with either. I just like the idea of experimenting to try to make it so that range builds have more nodes that you can experiment with. Because the other nodes that Warden has are very interesting, between like Oath of Summer, Oath of Winter, Oath of Spring, Avatar. Like these, Warden is like a relatively cool Ascendancy, has cool nodes. It sucks that a lot of times when you're playing a range build here, you're just like, well, I take all the tincture nodes, and then I either take Oath of Spring or I take a Bloodline now. So something to think about there. But essentially, I really like Warden. I actually like the design of tinctures, but I hate how they feel in practice, and I think we can basically give Warden the Mage Blood effect for them at a huge cost, so the Ascendancy keeps its identity, and then people actually consider picking it. So I think it's really sad when someone chooses to not pick an Ascendancy just because it feels terrible. Much like Master Surgeon on Pathfinder is an incredibly strong node, but I will frequently not pick it just because the idea of having to press the same key every 4 seconds for the rest of my life to keep my life flask up just sounds so unpleasant. Master Distiller on. So moving on to moving on to Pathfinder. Basically, same kind of change. A bigger nerf on Master Surgeon, which is the enduring life flask effect, where it just says now it has life flasks are automatically used when full. Removed 50% life recovery from flasks. Added 65% less life recovery from flasks. So just like a pretty big nerf on it, honestly, from what it is, because it's now no longer annoying, much like the Warden one. Just fully automate it so people actually feel like they can pick it without liking playing the game less. But a bigger nerf to compensate for that, because it will be up perfectly if you have enough recovery or enough flash charges. Deadeye, Windward. This used to say lose all Gale Force when hit. This is the node that's 4% less damage taken per Gale Force, and you stack up to 10. So if you're using a bunch of actions, you'll have 40% less damage taken from a hit, and then it falls off. I just want to change this so that when you take a hit, you lose half of your Gale Force. Windward is extremely underpicked on Deadeye, and I'm not saying for power level reasons. I think this node is strong. It's very niche. But I think part of the reason it's so weak is that it's not up consistently, and a lot of builds actually have trouble refilling these really quickly. But I would like to add conditional defense to Deadeye in some meaningful way, because that is like just something that I think is fair for what it is. I don't think this will drastically increase how much people pick this, but it's just an option for people who are playing a Deadeye who actually want to take defensive nodes. Occupying Force, much like my other changes for these, not so much like honestly the Ranger ones are all not so much power as much as they are quality of life. Occupying Force is a really strong node. This is the one that says you can have 2 additional Mirage Archers. Mirage Archers aren't attached to you. You can't use a Mirage Archer, which is like 6 meters within you or something. I don't remember. It's like you have to be pretty far away. It might only be 3 meters. I just want to change this so it just says cannot summon. Remove the part that says cannot summon a Mirage Archer while near a Mirage Archer. You're already paying a big cost on this because it doesn't affect your clear when you have these Mirage Archers out. So they need to be like, they're essentially stationary totems. So I don't think this needs a downside. You're already spending an Ascendancy point on it. They could lower the range how close you have to be, but honestly, I just find gameplay like that annoying and micromanagey, where it's just like you essentially want to turn your bow skills into half a totem. So I don't know, something to consider. I just think this node doesn't get picked because it's annoying, and I think we could change it to make it so that people can actually pick it without feeling like, oh, I don't want to take that because it's annoying. Just make it more options. Okay, moving on to int section of the tree. So Occultist. Now, I don't think Occultist needs a ton of changes. I think Occultist is kind of fine, honestly, right now. I think it's a little underpowered compared to a lot of Ascendancies, but there are good use cases for it. But I think some of the nodes could be made a little bit more fun. So like Unholy Authority, you can apply additional curse. Your hexes can affect hexproof enemies. I would like to change this into just something more interesting if we could. I could see it keeping your hexes can continue to hexproof enemies. That seems fine to me, but maybe we could change it to your curse limit is equal to your power charge limit, -1. So essentially an anathema -1. It's a little boring. Something a little more interesting could be curses supported by blasphemy, ignore your curse limit. 40% increased mana reservation efficiency of curse aura skills. 50% more area effective hexes. So it's just like basically makes it so that you can run around with as many curse auras as you want. You still have to pay that reservation on them, but it could be something very unique to Occultist to be running around with double blasphemy support, like double or triple blasphemy supported curses, where other classes probably will not do that just because the mana reservation would be so steep. And then option 3 would be you can apply additional curse for every 2 empty sockets you have. I do kind of like Buddy Paper who talks about this a lot. Where you could say that the Golem node on Elementalist is too strong, and it's like that's definitely true in a lot of cases. But I do like that it adds socket pressure to your character in a weird way that other archetypes don't, because that's like a balance angle that a lot of Ascendancies don't have. Necro does that. Necro does that actually a little bit too with the offering setup and stuff. So I think adding some kind of effect like that to the cultist would be actually on theme. So I could see something like that, like an additional curse for every 2 empty sockets seems fine. Could be higher than that, but honestly, socket pressure is really tight. So this downside is actually a lot higher than it would seem. A new node I would really like, just kind of some goofy idea I had, where I really like the design of things like Bane. So I thought it would be cool if she had another 2-pointer that said skills from equipped body armor can apply socketed hexes on hit. Skills that apply hexes weight deal X% more damage per applied hex. I was thinking like 25% more damage initially, but I could see that going higher or lower depending on what we think the balance is. Basically, it would turn any skill linked in your chest into Bane, and you could socket one curse would make it like a mediocre 6 support, but you get a curse applied from that skill all the time, and you could apply a second curse that way, and just make it a really mediocre 6 support. So just something to do, because that's kind of how Bane is. Bane's really good if you use one curse. It's pretty mediocre with the second one, but it's quality of life kind of thing. So just something you can do to like have your curses up more consistently if you're not going to do things like Blasphemy or Curse on Hit. Just kind of, I think, more thematic with occultist stuff. Okay, I have a pretty big one, so I'm going to go down to basically the duelist ones, because I have a decent amount of changes for these. So Gladiator. I really like the design of Gladiator, and it's really funny. They finally changed it so that he kind of like these minor nodes worked with staffs and like bows and stuff, because I was actually kind of annoyed for the longest time if you're like a rear guard character or a staff character, you weren't getting anything out of these minor nodes because it was a chance to block with shields or dual wielding. I forget how it was worded, but that got fixed. But then the awkward part is Deterrent Survivor is back to like not working with stuff like that. So Deterrent Survivor says gain 50% chance to block from equipped shield instead of the shield's value. Inherent bonuses from dual wielding are doubled, which basically lets you always have a 50% block shield, and then the normal block chance with dual wielding is 15%. This knocks it up to 30, and then things scale along those vectors, right? What I would like to change this node to is basically all that stuff is the same, but I would like to add staff implicits are doubled. Staffs usually have 25 attack or spell block, so this would make that 50. But you could also have weird niche cases where it doubles the charges from battery staff, or gives you 100% global crit off of an eclipse staff. I have no idea why you'd be taking Glad and doing that, but just weird stuff. And then it would say non-staff two-handed weapons grant 40% chance to block. So that means you take this node and you're just using a thicket bow, or any bow for that matter. You just get 40% chance to block from that bow. If you are like using a two-handed axe, you get 40% chance to block from that. So what this node would let you do is it would let you go block on things that have no business going block at a weaker rate. This 40% might be too high. I don't think so. Honestly, maybe it could be 35. But it would essentially let you go block on things that normally would never even consider that, making Glad a really weird build around that doesn't exist in other parts of the game. And then I also wanted to add this. This might be too excessive, but I just like the idea of it, where another line would say, this might need to be another 2-pointer somewhere else, but at that point I don't know if you'd actually spend 2 points on it. But I was debating on making this a part of this or as a separate 2-pointer, but it says, shield nodes, including cluster jewels and masteries on the tree, also apply to all two-handed weapons at 75% of their value. So what that would mean is if you took these shield nodes on the tree right here, right? Or like I take Tetsudo, it says 10% chance to block attack damage while holding a shield. That would say 7% chance to block attack damage for if you're using like an axe or a bow or something like that. And then you could also take the attack damage like nodes while wielding a shield at like a worst rate. These are going to be significantly worse, but because like you especially lose on these increased defenses from equipped shield, because if you're using like an axe or a bow, you don't have an equipped shield. But point is, it would open up things that you could take, and then the masteries for like 1% chance to block attack damage per 5% chance to block an equipped shield. It would just be that 40 based off that 40% and stuff like that. It could all key off that, and I think that could be something interesting to consider. Just like it would make the tree, like it would make pathing for Gladiator, if you wanted to build like that, weird in a way that no other archetype could be built. So it just would add a new way of building characters to the game. Okay, now Weapon Master. Weapon Master, I think, is one of my favorite nodes in the tree that I would never consider taking because I just don't think it's strong enough almost ever. I think the 20% of Leech's instant while wielding claw node option is very good for this, but outside of that, a little jank. Although the AoE is a little bit harder to get, and then more critical chance of getting dagger is good, but it's hard to play a lot of archetypes on Glad, which is what I kind of want to address here. So basically, I'm adding dual wielding 2 weapons of the same type. Grant the below bonuses at 150% of the value. So you would, whatever is listed here, you would get it at 1.5 rate if you're dual wielding daggers, dual wielding like maces or whatever. And then you would get one of each. Like let's say I'm wielding a sword in one hand and a dagger in my offhand, or vice versa. I would get the sword notable and then I'll get the dagger notable. Where if I'm wielding 2 of the same things, I get one of the values listed here, but then I get it at 1.5 rate. And then I added 2 additional ones. I guess I'm just buffing the Mason Scepter ones for more area of effect. This might be too high, honestly, because I'm doing more area of effect. Might be putting too much more area of effect, honestly, after looking at this change. But you know, we could always adjust those numbers, you know. But and then instead of 20% more critical strike chance of wielding dagger, it's 25. Because these nodes are extremely underpicked, and I don't want to say underpicked as in like people should be taking them more. I think they're underpowered, and I think the design is so interesting that I would like to make it actually something people will be excited to take, because it's just so cool to build around stuff like this. But okay, so other one that I'm adding is 2% of damage leeches energy shield and 1% of energy shield recovered on block while wielding staff. And then I have a bunch of options on bows that I'm unsure of on like what direction to take. It could be skills fire 2 additional projectiles or 1 additional projectile. I think that would be a little too weak. It could be projectile split fork or chain, or some combination of multiple of those. It could have 30% more projectile speed while wielding a bow, 30% more of effect for projectile skills while wielding a bow, or something like that. There's a lot of options you could take for a bow here. But I see no reason that Glad can't actually use a bow or get benefits from like using a bow or an axe or something like that. Okay. Slayer, Overwhelm, remove, he has base, this is such a minor buff. Base critical strike chance for weapons is 8%. And then I'm changing it to base critical strike chance is 8.5. So what that is doing is, this sounds really weird because it sounds like such a minor buff. It's like getting another 0.5 base crit to your weapon. But if you, whatever reason, are playing a spell Slayer, you could consider taking this node to buff the spell base crit of spells or generic things like Detonate Dead. I don't know why you would ever do that, but it just adds an additional option for building your character. And then I also think, similar to that Impact, where it's 25% more melee damage based on proximity, I think it's fine to have stuff that's like really restrictive like this on Ascendancies, but if you just make it deal 15% more damage based on proximity, that would open it up to things like spells or generic attacks, you know, just like stuff like that. Give Slayer, because Slayer is very hard to do as a lot of stuff, and I think opening it up would be interesting. Champion, I have a few changes here, but I think I kind of went back because initially I was going to make it so Master of Metal. This is the Impale node that is also very underpicked in the current state of the game. Impale is not exactly super weak right now, but it is a little hard to utilize, and Champion has so many good nodes that's like this node feels a little weak, and Impale being a little weak means this node is not taken that highly. But point is, travel nodes, I'm changing from, instead of 10% chance to 15% chance to impale, or 10% chance to impale and hit with attacks, I'm just changing it to 10% chance to impale. So it works for spells as well as attacks. And then I have 2 options that I came up with for Master of Metal, because I would like to see it changed a little bit. I don't think it needs to change too much, but I think you could make it a little bit stronger than it currently is. So instead of having it be you gain 6 to 12 added physical damage for each impaling enemy, I'm just changing it to 18 to 14, just a small buff, not anything too crazy. And then I would also have it say you and nearby allies deal 3% more physical spell damage per impaling enemies, because this flat is not going to do anything for spells, not anything realistically, but so you could make it a more percent physical spell damage to make this node actually something you would consider taking on, like a spell, I don't know, like some kind of weird spell impale champ, which I think is fine because champ is just such a bad spot on the tree for like a lot of the stuff anyway. But him being like impales, like him having an impale centric node and then changing the generic impale nodes like down here, instead of being to like merciless skewering, all the skewering nodes, all the words that have skewering in it, to being generic impale could make it so you have some weird spell impale archetype at the bottom of the tree on champion. Also another option I had for this, instead of doing that, instead of changing this node that way, I could see removing the 6 to 12 physical damage per impaling enemy, and then adding 100% chance to impale and hit, so you're always impale capped when you pick this, and then it's saying overcapped impale chance applies to impale effect at 50% of its value. So you could pick up additional impale chance to scale your impale effect, and then you get a tiny 10% over just from the travel node for doing that. I'm not sure. Like, I think champion is actually perfectly fine. I just think making master of metal a little bit more generic could open up options for how you could, like, situations where you would consider taking him. Berserker, extremely small change in theory. Instead of Gore Dancer being 30% of life leeches instant, I just want to change it to 30% of leeches instant, so that if you are playing your weird CI Berserker that you would probably almost never do, it would work. Or if you're playing big mana Berserker, this would also work. I think those situations would be extremely rare, but it would enable extremely weird archetypes. Okay, Chieftain. This is probably too much to change, but I think Namahu's Flame Advance, this is the node where it says non-unique jewels and radius. Also change everything to fire damage and then give you +4, and then like the non-notables, or what is it notables? It's small notables, right? I didn't know small notables. Yeah. So yeah, small notables and large radius also grant 4 to strength. I think this node is very interesting. It's just really underpowered, and I kind of want to just change it to make it something you consider picking. So basically what I wanted to do is I wanted it to change all nodes in radius in a very large radius, which, like, for example, I can show you right here. So like right here, this large radius would be this blue one, and then that purple one would be the very large radius. So it would affect far more stuff. Like, for example, right here, this misses this large misses the sword nodes. It stops right here. But if it's very large, it hits these sword nodes. It just hits more stuff. And then it's like you hit more mace nodes this way. So like a small buff to be very large radius instead of large, but then a really weird change in that I want it to change all things that say weapons instead of saying weapons at all. Just to remove that, and then just like it literally just remove the with weapon part. So for example, right here, if I hit these sword nodes where it says 8% increase attack speed with swords, it would just say 8% increase attack speed. It would say 20% increase physical damage with swords, it would just say 20% increase fire damage. Like essentially removing the melee weapon specific part of the text in addition to changing things to fire. What that would mean is that you could, like, essentially it's like a bit weird Veranostra effect on the part of the tree that you're taking rare jewel sockets on, which is pretty steep because unique jewels are incredibly strong in current PoE. So something weird that this could do. This might be too complicated. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but basically it would allow weird pathing on Chieftain that other archetypes don't get. Much in the way that, like, I want Glad to do that with, like, potentially shield nodes, or has an option, and then what Trickster would potentially do with his weird node behind Polymath. Just adding weird specific things to Ascendancies that other things don't have. Okay, and then Inquisitor. I would like to, I believe it used to have this, where it used to have increased Consecrated Ground effect on these travel nodes. I think adding that back is honestly kind of fine on these two minor nodes. Doesn't need to happen, just a minor buff to Consecrated Ground effect, because these have been nerfed over the past, and I think a minor buff wouldn't hurt. The real node that I want to enable on Inquisitor, because this is another node that I think is, I should not have ate a huge dinner before I started recording this. I was like so burpy. Anyways, I'm sorry. Instrument of Zeal. I think Instrument and Zeal on Inquisitor is one of the cooler Ascendancy nodes in the game, but it just feels so bad to actually use that, like, anytime you try, you're just like, oh, this isn't worth it. So I think it's possible we could remove the gain 1 fanaticism charge every second if you've attacked in the past second, which means you can only gain 1 charge per second. So if you just, basically you could attack 4 times in a second and then just spend the next 4 seconds casting. Attack 4 times in a second, spend the next 4 seconds. There's something like that where it'd be just more reasonable, as opposed to having it be this clunky thing that makes people not actually pick it. I don't know if this is how you change this, but it's basically, I love what Instrument of Zeal does, this fanaticism, where it's like it's trying to create this battle mage archetype that doesn't really exist. So I think some way that we could buff this, even if we overdo it to make it an archetype, would be awesome, because it's like this fantasy that what Templar basically is supposed to be, like spells and attacks, doesn't exist. So anything that we could do to buff this to make it an option for people to actually take to have that fantasy sounds incredible to me, just because it's so weird. I think an average that's going to be like you're shield charging around and then just like using it, but I think in single target it could be a little bit weirder than just that. I don't know. So some way to change this to actually make this a usable node, because I think it's close. I just think it needs some tweaks to feel better and not clunky, which is honestly a lot of stuff in PoE. It's like this thing's right on the cusp, but it's too annoying to actually use. Guardian, I think this Ascendancy needs a pretty big buff. I genuinely, it's so all over the place that I can't recommend how to buff it because I don't know what Guardian is exactly supposed to be outside of like this party-centric or ally-centric buffing class. Because it's like you have the Shrine nodes that's like pretty interesting, and then you have Radiant Crusade, which is really strong but a little annoying, and then you have Unwavering Crusade, the one that triggers Ellie Relics, is incredibly strong. Like these 4 points are great, and then you have some random amounts of attack and spell block here, which is good. These nodes are fine, and then you have good reservation stuff. It's just like, and then this weird regen one that I don't think is quite strong enough, but I don't really know how to change it without making it like busted. Yeah, so I don't know. I think the Ascendancy needs more. It might just need more nodes. Like honestly, like if it's party centric like this and these nodes are kind of all over the place, it's possible that it doesn't. These nodes don't need to be buffed. It just needs additional options. Because I think it's fine if it had a bunch of choices, because it's just a bunch of things that are kind of all over the place. And maybe that's fine for an Ascendancy to be like that. Ascendant, I think needs massive buffs to a lot of stuff. Honestly, I know it's scary to buff Ascendant too much, but there are basically Ascendancies that you would just never pick. Like for example, Assassin, I have never considered taking. It's plus 0.75 to critical strike chance. That is awful. And then it gets you power charges. And then the flavor tech. The fact that they put the flavor text in here of damage from critical strikes cannot be reflected here is like kind of offensive. So it's like this Ascendancy, you're not going to spend points on plus 0.75 to critical strike chance, which is what you get for corrupting gloves, by the way. Like that's an implicit on glove corruption. And then some way to generate power charges, because power charge is the easiest charge to generate. I think he could honestly have, like, if it's not something crazy, it could be something like he could get the all damage can poison here. Either a choice node here where it's all damage can poison, or the base critical strike chance node would be fine. And then some less damage penalty to come with that, just because that might be too strong as like a Ascendancy node. But it's at least more interesting. Like as it stands, you'd never pick it. Chieftain, he gets increased strength and warp cry buff effect, and then chance to cover enemies in ash, which is not that hard to get, and then unaffected by ignite. It's just like these are so mediocrely strong. Like a lot of this effect you can get elsewhere, and it's just not very powerful. I don't know. I guess I'm not gonna go through all of them honestly, because it's gonna be a lot. But basically, some of the nodes I think are, because it's like so you have like Pathfinder is good, because you get Flask automated. Deadeye is good because it's a way to get additional projectiles, Tailwind, some damage from Mark Effect, and stuff like that. That Frenzy Charge every 3 seconds while moving is flavor text, that doesn't actually work. And then you have things like Trickster, which rewards you for taking more nodes in the tree. And then Sab is just really bad. It's like a little bit of CDR, which is kind of embarrassing when you compare it to like the Bloodline that gives you a little bit more CDR. I think this node could just give you more CDR, and that's like the draw to picking this. But yeah, essentially, I think a lot of the nodes are just, I guess it's fine that the nodes are like generic power, but I think it's more interesting if these nodes are built around like the Ascendancies are themselves. Like what Deadeye is here, giving you additional projectiles, and then Pathfinder giving you like basically perma uptime on utility flasks, and then Warden giving you additional tincture. I could even see Warden here giving you a just the effect, instead of additional tincture, it's your tinctures are always active as opposed to additional tincture. But if you change the other Warden node to do that. But yeah, essentially, I think more of these should be built around. I do love what happened with Bloodlines, where it's like I can spend 3 points on Pathfinder here, spend 3 points on Trickster here, and then I can spend 2 points on a Bloodline. I think that change alone is so good for Ascendant, but I still think some of these could just stand to be more interesting. But that's pretty much it for all the Ascendancies. So moving on to tree balance, a lot of it's going to be balanced in the Ranger and Shadow section of the tree, because I think it is quite weak defensively right now. Like I touched on this in my Assassin video, but I want to add 2 additional life wheels between Ranger and Shadow. I'd be fine with just another one, or even increasing the size of the life wheels that we have. Most of the life wheels in this section of the tree are not, they're just like these 3-pointers here, where I could see these getting bigger. I don't know where we'd actually put them. They could be literally between Ranger and Shadow, one below Ranger, one above Shadow, or somewhere in the middle, maybe one by Ghost Dance, like another life and ES one, like melding, like the melding wheel. Or something like that, like Written in Blood kind of deal. Like another one like that would be fine as well. But kind of want to make it so you don't have to go life and EOS on this part of the tree, and you could actually just go life, just because that just literally opens up more options. Just a really straightforward one is how Marauder has these life and armor nodes right here coming out of his start. I'd like to change Ranger to be the same thing, where she has evasion and life as opposed to just evasion here. Like lower the evasion amount on these slightly, but make like a 4% increased life here. It could even be 3% increased life if we want to continue to hate Ranger like that. I would also like to add, and this is not in this part of the tree, an area of effect mastery. There are a lot of area of effect nodes on the tree. Most of them are part of these generic things where they don't actually have a mastery. They're just like in starting sections of the tree. But I would like to see like an area of effect mastery because there's just like weird stuff you could do with that, like more area of effect, less lesser reduced damage, or just like various thing that like convert area damage into something else, or just stuff like that. Just because there are a lot of them and they just turn into whatever they are that gives AoE. Like this, like Arcane Expanse here is spells have increased area of effect, so it just turns into a caster mastery. And then down here we have Brinkmanship, which is just melee area of effect that just turns into a generic attack mastery. So there's like room for that, I think. I don't know if this is too powerful, but I would be open to having a multi-shot wheel at the top of the tree that is just spells, like how in PoE 2 we have a spells fire additional projectiles, like probably directly above Elementalist or somewhere around that, like pretty far away from multi-shot. Speaking of multi-shot, I would also like to change multi-shot to be skills fire an additional projectile. It's possible that if we have a spells fire additional projectile at the top of the tree, that this should not be changed to generic skills fire additional projectile. That might be too strong, but I'm kind of okay with seeing where the chips lie if we do this, where you have a spells fire additional projectile at the top of the tree, or just skills fire additional projectile at the top of the tree. So basically another source of additional proj that you could get over here. And then if you do want to travel all the way down to that and multi-shot, I think that's kind of fine just because that is just so much travel or annoyance. If you really want to hammer that home where make this generic projectile and make this one generic projectile, but you move it like to the left of Elementalist, so it's like almost impossible to get both to just balance it. And then if someone wants to waste their anoint on it, not waste, but spend their anoint on it, I think that's fine. I also would like to see more elemental avoidance wheels in the tree. The values we have are quite small and they're very rare. Like right here, we have like you can spend 3 points here getting is it like 20 like 30% generic avoid and then 52 a specific element like shock, chill, or something like that. But I think having a few other small wheels like this littered throughout the tree would be fine because while you can use it on your gear to get LA element avoidance, the values in the tree are so small that it's like you can get like 60% from your boots, but it's just like spending 3 skill points in the tree to get LA element avoidance is actually quite steep investment, and people are generally not spending points on crystal skin like this. So I think the values on these could stand to be buffed, and then add a few more just as options for people to get LA element avoidance on the tree without having to all use unique jewels to get that which I think it's fine. I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of the end game of Trade League being everybody is using either Ancestral Vision or Storm Shroud to get LA element avoidance. So I would like to add more ways to get it that are not everybody's jewels just looking the same like that. We all use Watcher's Eye. I'll use Storm Shroud or Ancestral Vision. We all use Light of Meaning. We all use I think I already said Watcher's Eye, but we all use Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame. It's just like there's too many generic powerful nodes that people use. So I'd like to add some of that stuff to the tree, possibly even nerfing those jewels that are that strong. But just essentially having more ways to build characters without everything looking samey. Okay, sorry, back to the tree. I'm off my soapbox. I would like to add another generic poison chance. Probably. I don't know exactly where to put it. Maybe between Supreme Ego and Overcharge, like right here between Ranger and Shadow. Could be more in the middle of the tree here. But essentially, it's really hard on certain archetypes to actually get poison chance cap. And generally, when I say certain archetypes, I generally mean spells. Attacks have a much easier time because there are so many wheels that have generic chance to poison, even if they're weapon specific. Like this bow wheel, you can still take on bows. This dagger wheel, you can still take on bows. Like it just like no matter what weapon your type. Because they don't say chance to poison with this weapon type, they just say chance to poison, and then they're part of a weapon wheel. Where spells don't really have that kind of same thing, so it's just much harder to actually get these. And then related to that, a lot of these poison nodes are really awkward with Perfect Agony, which I think on some level is fine, because Perfect Agony is, you pay the cost of this where the dot multi nodes no longer work for you. But I think some of them could be changed to having generic global crit strike multiplier. Like for example, like down here where we have like Swift Venoms, I think some of these nodes that have damage over time multiplier could just say global critical strike multiplier so that attack builds that are not poison can consider taking them, opening up the tree a little bit in that kind of way. Where like for example, Hunter's Gambit, which is this bow wheel right here, I think these damage over time multiplier for poison nodes could also have 6% to global critical strike multiplier, because for non-perfect agony poison builds they wouldn't do anything, and then for perfect agony builds you could consider taking these, because right now you just don't. It's just like these nodes are just dead to you basically. And it's very hard to actually get poison chance capped on Perfect Agony because you have to take these poison chance nodes, and then these poison chance nodes come with dot multi, meaning a lot of your tree gets eaten for things that don't actually do anything for your damage. Now, much later in the league, when you have access to tattoos, you can convert a lot of your int nodes to chance to poison nodes, but early on, it's pretty hard to actually go Perfect Agony without like spewing a ton of points getting chance to poison or getting some weird way chance to poison, like using snakebite gloves or the curse mastery for chance to poison and just like weird stuff like that. So I think this will just open up things, honestly. I think a big one for spells in particular is I would like to just see another 15% chance to poison spell node, like either here to make this travel an additional point, or it's like some weird off here, like a little dingleberry out here, in case someone wants to spend points for it, because it is very hard to get poison chance capped on spells. I feel like I've said that 1,000 times, but it's a very real problem. Anybody's PoE beta character that's not actually able to use chance to poison support, or especially ones that are not assassin. So assassin makes it a little bit easier, but it's still quite difficult. Okay. Let me see if I have anything else related to poison. Oh yeah, this wheel might be the most awkward wheel in the tree. The Dire Torment wheel. This used to be one of the biggest draws to being Perfect Agony before the rework, where it just crit multi applied to dot multi at half the value, and now it sets it equal to your crit multi. But so you never take Dire Torment on any build anymore. This wheel in the tree just doesn't exist. So I'd like to change it so that this 14% damage over time multiplier for ailments from critical strikes. I would also just like to have all of the nodes that say this on this, where it's like 25% damage over time multiplier from critical strikes. I would like to say just have all of these just say 14 to global critical strike multiplier for ailments, in addition to that, or some weird way that it's only Perfect Agony builds taking it. If this wheel is intended to be for Perfect Agony builds, I think it should fucking work for them, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense. Like this being part of your payoff. It could be more generic removed, or this could become the chance to poison wheel too, or something. But I like the fact that this is like a big payoff if you're happen to be like some weird Perfect Agony Ignite build in this section of the tree or something, right? So it's not just poison. I'm trying to see if I missed anything else that I want to talk about on poison over here. No, I think that is most of it. In this section of the tree, I want to buff some of the keystones down here that I think are a little weak. I think Wind Dancer is relatively strong on like basically pinnacles, and then you don't want to take it much outside of that just because it's going to get you killed a lot of the time if you're taking a sustained amount of hits. So I think we could remove the attack damage, or not remove the attack damage, lower the attack damage. It's 20% more attack damage taken if you've been hit recently. I think that could be lowered to like 10% or maybe 15. We could try 10% and see if it's too problematic, but I think just adding more consistent defenses to this part of the tree that you could take would be nice. I think there's a lot of things you could do with acrobatics. Right now, it's not pickable, not really. Like you're not ever taking acrobatics outside of that weird Precio Ascendancy that gives you suppression cap, but then suppression sucks. It's one of the Ranger Ascendancies, I don't remember what it is. But outside of that, I think we could just make it something that people actually want to take. I could see just changing the spell dodge at, like the spell dodge you get at 75% of the value suppression. I still don't think that is good enough. But I think it could be something people consider very rarely, so making it still extremely niche keystone. I could see it saying something like spell suppression instead applies to generic dodge, not just spells, at 50% of the value, and then it comes with two massive downsides. I'm not sure what they are, probably something like 50% less evasion rating, 50% less energy shield. You could also see using the PoE 2 version where it's like your evasion applies to physical damage reduction, but I don't want to copy too much straight from PoE 2, and then so the games end up being too samey. I would like to add a new keystone where it would convert some amount of your evasion rating to life somehow. My initial idea was evasion rating instead grants plus 100 to maximum life per 5,000 evasion rating. That might not be strong enough, honestly, because that's really not that much flat life. But I could see that being a little bit higher. But something weird where it's like essentially you take this part of the tree and you turn your damage avoidance into raw hit pool. It's kind of similar to like what like Wind Dancer or Iron Reflexes does, where you convert your evasion rating to armor, so you convert your evasion rating to raw physical direction. This part would let you convert your evasion rating into like raw life. I don't know where this keystone would go, probably somewhere in the ranger section of the tree, just unsure where. I want to add +3 spell prevention to all of the spell suppression nodes in this part of the tree. Inveterate already has +3, so it'd make that +5. But essentially, I think you should get paid off for being suppression in this section of the tree, because I assume the reason suppression is nerfed because it's like pseudo mandatory in hardcore, but in general it's just like getting suppression cap just means you take 40% reduce damage from spells, which is really powerful. It used to be just like half damage reduction, but if you're in this part of the tree and you're actually getting it from the tree rather than just on gear, as like getting it from gear is why anybody can get it on any section of the tree, although it's quite difficult. So I think you should be paid off for being in the section of the tree and getting suppression with getting like a bigger version of suppression cap. Like basically going back to like in this part of the tree, your suppression is like 50% reduction, where getting it just from gear elsewhere is going to be like 40%. So some way to bridge that gap, I think, is actually a good way to do that. I think melding, just this gain 3% of maximum life as extra max energy shield could be just changed to 6% of life as extra max energy shield, or a little bit lower than that, because this node's still quite decent. But I just like effects like this. Like I wouldn't mind seeing another melding effect on the tree elsewhere, honestly. Just I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. I'm kind of torn because this melding a style effect used to be like just a rare body armor craft that you would pretty much not use ES gear, and then you would just craft 10% of life as extra max ES on your body armor. And that was removed for obvious reasons. It's just far too strong. But I think adding this kind of thing more in this like shadow section of the tree could make sense. Although I don't want it to be where you have to go life plus ES in this part of the tree to just not get one shot. Or you go pure ES, right? Like I want some way to go life, but I do like this archetype, so I don't think adding another version of it somewhere else around here could be fine. Like if one of the life wheels was another melding effect, I would be perfectly happy with that. Just trying to think of where. Oh yeah, I mean I don't need to probably go through the specific nodes that I changed to add crit multi to. I don't want to add crit multi to every single poison node, so that Perfect Agony can just have free range and take all the nodes that all the poison nodes could take too. I want it to be like the generic nodes have crit multi, where like the weapon specific ones probably don't, or something like that. Just so it's, because it should be a downside. Taking Perfect Agony should be somewhat of a downside in the pathing. Like you shouldn't be able to take all the poison nodes. But so I don't think they should all get crit multi, but just some of them to just make it a little bit more reasonable. Because if you try to build a PoB Perfect Agony character, you quickly run into how the fuck do I get poison chance capped? It's just like you can use snake bites, but then snake bites also have the downside of it's like you get dot multi per frenzy charge. So it's like no matter what you do, you just get completely blasted by trying to get poison chance capped on Perfect Agony builds. So I think some way to make that easier is just huge. Okay. Now, I guess I should mention these masteries while I'm still in the section of the tree. I don't think it's a huge change, but I would prefer to change this bow mastery instead of increases and reduction to proj speed also apply to damage with bows. Instead to say increase and reduction to proj speed also apply to damage while wielding a bow. So you could have, if you're scaling a bunch of proj speed, you could scale ailments, or you could, if you're using a bow but you're casting a spell, you could still scale the damage that way. Why would you want to take a bow mastery while dealing spell damage? I have no idea, but there have been instances where there probably are instances where you would consider it. It's just not a huge change for potentially niche benefit. It might be too strong for ailments, because it's like that's a big downside of having to scale proj speed and ailment builds on bows is you can't convert that to damage. Like if you're playing poison tornado shot, for example, not being able to convert that proj speed to damage is like a huge downside and like a balancing fact. So that might be too good for it. So I could see this just also still being just hit damage, but that's how I have it for now. So it'll work with odds. I'm adding to the lightning mastery a 40% of lightning damage converted to chaos to just like bridge the gap of Voltaxic style builds. So this in combination with Lycia would let you go lightning to chaos, which is a very supported archetype in the game, and just make an easier way to do that. Or for just like, I don't know if the Foulborn uniques are going to exist going forward, where you can easily convert like lightning to chaos and like elemental damage to chaos in general, but I think adding that to masteries is fine, especially for lightning, because it's like it's lightning to chaos, or even fire to chaos is like an archetype that already exists. Where cold to chaos I think would be weird, but it's like, yeah, you have like consuming dark and stuff like that. Okay, anyways, I also think just while I'm near attacking cast speed stuff too, I think there could be a speed mastery like for nodes where it's like they have cast speed, attack speed, and stuff like that, where it's like a bunch of these nodes are like a cast and speed, or like cooldown recovery speed with movement speed, like down here we have Fleetfoot and stuff like that. I think there could be a speed mastery that could convert some portion of speed to damage, or sacrifice some portion of speed for damage, or add some small amount of cooldown recovery speed, like generic cooldown recovery speed. I think there's something there, just because these nodes are like these nodes are just evasion, and then these nodes are just casters again, where it's like I think there's some options for cool new masteries we could add, because it's actually been a while since we've added a new mastery, and I think some of these could open up some kind of builds. But anyways, this next change is actually quite big. I don't know how strong it will be exactly, but changing all of the impale nodes on the tree that are generic impale, not impale with weapons, to being generic chance to impale. Like instead of 10% chance to, like if I look at the merciless skewering, where is it? There's so many impale nodes. It's all the nodes that end with skewering. I'm just gonna highlight this. Okay, so we have the brutal skewering node, the merciless skewering node, and then forceful skewering. This one's just impale effect regardless. But so all these say chance to impale and hit with attacks, and I just want to remove the with attacks part of that. So spell builds can take these impale nodes as well. But all the weapon specific nodes, like there's impale, where is it? Sorry, there's impale axe nodes like down here and stuff. I don't actually want these to change. I think those could stay the same just because they're weapon specific. But even something like harpooner up here, I could see just changing instead of 20% chance to impale and hit with two-handed weapons, I could see changing this to 20% chance to impale and hit while wielding a two-handed weapon. And then 30% increase effect impale, you inflict with two-handed weapons on non-impaled enemies. I could just say while wielding a two-handed weapon. So just like more options, because it's already a pretty big, just to be clear, it's already a pretty big downside to be spells in this section of the tree already. So I don't think it's a massive change to just make these work with spells, because you literally, like, you don't have other nodes you could really take down here anyway. It's like all the nodes are like either fizz centric or attack specific, so it's just like really tough to be in this section of the tree. Speaking of which, I think it would be really cool if we added a keystone in the Marauder section that would convert, that would say increase and reduction to attack speed instead apply to cast speed, or also apply to attack speed or something like that. Basically reverse Wilma's down in the section of the tree, so you could convert your attack speed to cast speed. So if you are a caster in the section, you could take advantage of actually picking up attack speed, or being a berserker that's picking up rage effect, or it's like scaling rage. Like it's like some weird combination of you have a bunch of attack speed, but you're a caster and you're down here for some reason. I think that is. Oh yeah, I forgot. I did want to add block wheels to between Ranger and Shadow, just because block is like literally just in Duelist, and I don't see no reason. I see no reason that you shouldn't be able to go block here. You can go block down here. You can get some block up here, down here. It's like this section of the tree is the only section that doesn't actually have block, which I guess is pure evasion shouldn't have block, but I don't think it's huge harm to add more options for various archetypes and being in different parts of the tree. Like I don't want the block nodes up here to be as good as the block nodes down here, because that is the incentive to be in this section of the tree. But weaker block nodes up here, much like weaker block nodes at the top of the tree, I think are perfectly fine. There was something else that I wanted to discuss that I swear I missed. Sorry, just going through it real quick. Man, it'd be really nice if I was editing this so you didn't have to deal with me just like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. Here was the big two ones I did miss. As opposed to either changing these area of effect nodes that I was mentioning earlier, I could see changing these to be either some of these nodes to having more area of effect, or even just the area of effect mastery having more area of effect with some kind of downside, like area of effect less damage, area of effect reduced cast attack speed, kind of stuff like that. Like some combination of things to get more area of effect on the tree if we don't want to either give it from increased area of effect support. But it's like I'm kind of okay if we want to add more area of effect to things at the cost of damage. Basically, things that are like, I know it sounds very PoE 2 coded, but things like lesser multiple projectiles, volley, like things that have you additional projectiles at a cost of damage. I think things like that are fine, because it's like you don't want to just give everybody raw AoE for no downside, especially if the values are reasonable. But they could be more area of effect at really small values too, like 20% increased area of effect. Spells have 20% increased area of effect. This could just be spells have 10% more area of effect. I don't think that would be ridiculously unreasonable. Like just like things like that, as more ways to scale your builds. Or those could again just be masteries. But okay, back to me not following a script and being all over the place. I think a lot of the section in the bottom part of the tree, this is a big portion of why I changed Chieftain's Namahu's Flame Advance, is that so many of the nodes in this part of the tree like hard call out fizz damage, like fizz damage with swords, both of these wheels, fizz damage with axes, like all this stuff is just fizz damage with scepters. I don't know that I love that. I don't know why it is that way. It's like, it's so hard to be in this section of the tree and not be a fizz build, which is like, I guess that's like a balancing act, but I don't like so like if I'm like an ice crash build that's like stacking flat Ellie, it's like you just can't be in the section of the tree at all. Or like there's so many builds where you just can't be in the section of the tree at all, where it's like axes, you're generally going to be fizz anyway, just because axes are just so good as fizz weapons because they have so much base fizz, like especially for like a curry chopper main. But it's like, so I don't see a huge reason for these to be calling out fizz specifically, where they could just be generic damage, which would open up build options around here, which this section of the tree is already quite strong, so maybe we don't need to do that. But I just don't like how you have to be like fizz in this part of the tree, where in other parts of the tree they don't call out stuff as much. Like this section of the tree has a ton of Ellie stuff. I get that. But it's just like I think making things more generic damage. Like not all of these have to be not fizz, but I would like to change a lot of them to be not fizz, just to make it more reasonable to be Ellie in this section of the tree. Because it's like you're already fighting an uphill battle generally if you're Ellie in this section of the tree because you don't have access to pen. Like if you're in this section of the tree, you don't have access to an elemental mastery to do elemental flip to like flip elemental resistances, or you don't have things like force of nature. We have like Ellie pen and stuff like that. It's just like I guess there is technically a little bit of fire pen down here, but point is it's already kind of an uphill battle over here. So I think changing some of these to be generic would be perfectly acceptable to me. So some last things before I get back to gems. Various things that didn't fit in the other section. Like mechanical changes to the game that I would like to see, pretty small amount, but like things like knockback working on uniques. I just kind of want to see what that happens in League. Right now it's really hard to actually build around knockback because, well, one, I don't think it's strong enough. Like I don't think the knockback effect, it knockbacks far enough. But also in addition to that, you can't really use it in single target scenarios because you can't knock back uniques. If that is too powerful, we can maybe undo that in the following League, but I would just like to see where that lies. Like maybe you need to invest more in knockback to make that work, or you just remove it in the option entirely. But we never really had the choice as far as I know, so I would like to see what happens if we could, because there are weird things you could do with that, open up ways to build characters. This one's probably mostly for SSF gamers, but I really dislike how 9 and 10 passive large cluster duels can drop, and then for the vast majority of the time how 6 passive medium cluster duels can drop. I don't think it really adds much to the game when you're like, it feels really bad when, like, for example, you're trying to roll like a 3 notable large passive cluster duel is already just so much investment in currency, especially in SSF, that like not even being able to access it in the first place is just such a feel bad. So I think being able to reroll them with a Blessed Orb would be relatively fair because they already are hard to craft as is. I don't think we need to make it so you also drop the like this restricted base. I could see the cluster duel drop rate getting lowered or something to compensate for this. But essentially, they're already hard to roll. I don't think we need another layer of RNG on top of that, of like dropping in the first place. Similar, instilling orbs, I would like to see just getting either removed and then just that base functionality baked into flasks, like into utility flasks. It's something you could just right click, have it drop down, and select how you want to use the flask, or like how it, like either reuse on full, reuse at the end of effect, like stuff like that, just like how they have normally. But you don't need to actually wait like some amount of hours into League to be able to do that, because this is probably not a huge deal for the vast majority of players. But as someone who does a lot of fresh starts, like either Watchstone runs or starting a new like new game modes, or like starting private leagues, just like things like that, I spend probably about half my time not having my flasks automated. And as someone who can't currently play PoE because their hands are fucked up from playing PoE, I would love a change like this, because I don't think it's meaningful that I'm pressing the same keys every 4 seconds and just getting like RSI. I think that we decided that we could automate flasks, and I think we should just commit to it. Flasks are part of your build and they are interesting, but having them automated without like the pain point of like the first like 12 or 16 hours of the league of where you have to actually press them is just not meaningful. Like I think it's meaningful when you're fighting a boss and you're pressing like 2 to 3 different keys to deal damage, like you're essentially throwing a bunch of different stuff at them early on, then you reduce additional skills as your character gets stronger. But I don't think automating your flasks is a fun part of that progression, and I think it could just go away, personally. I love that quality was changed to a more multiplier instead of increased. That just made bases better, but I don't think it had to come with the added benefit of removing glassblowers baubles, and then now it's even harder to automate flasks than when we started this whole conversation. So anyways, T17s. Holy shit. I can't say enough negative things about T17s. I hate all of the layouts. I hate all of the bosses. I hate all of the T17 mods. Not all of them, just the vast majority of them. Like the pen one's fine and stuff like that. The ones that are just really dangerous but don't make the game unfun to play. But basically, T17 mods were made difficult in a way that is very, very unfun. They have the PoE 2 coded thing of like really tight hallways, so you just get gang blasted by a bunch of mobs. They have things that just mods that just turn off your build, like Desolation. Like there's 1,000 mobs in my screen. When I died to Desolation, it's not because I'm an idiot, I stepped in Desolation. It's because I couldn't see the floor because there's 1,000 mobs in my screen. It's like T17s have so many mobs, the hallways are so tight. It's just like stuff like this that just like, oh, I guess I wasn't leeching then because I couldn't, because I accidentally stepped on something I couldn't see. Much like Exarch Runes just lowering your resistances, and I think it lowers your cooldown recovery, speed, and movement skills. Can't remember exactly. Getting petrified, removing control of your character, drowning orbs just killing you outright. And then just various on death effects, making it really, really, it's like literally more annoying to loot in T17s, and T17s have more loot than other maps. It's like so crazy to me how that's the case. Like, just the amount of time you'll just stand waiting for Elder Anomalies to just blow up so you can actually loot. Like maybe you could keep these in volatile explosions or whatever, just like around, but make the damage of them lower so you could, like tanky characters can actually loot through them. But it's just like if I kill a pack, there's a bunch of loot on the ground, but there's like four just like waiting for those elder circles to expand on it. I just have to wait like 10 seconds. It's like, yep, here we go. It's like you've made it painful to loot in your looting game. It's just so unfun to me. And then the action speed per action taken recently is just so crazy to me because in ARPGs your character gets stronger the more actions you can take per second. And then this mod just says, well, the natural progression of ARPGs is the opposite now because now the more actions you take, the weaker your character is. It's just like it just feels so bad. And then dealing no damage 3 out of 10 seconds, you just can't run this mod. This just kills you. Your character essentially gets turned off for 3 seconds, especially if your form of recovery comes from dealing damage, which is much like Desolation. Just like turning off your character is just not very fun. It feels terrible and just kills you. When bosses can deal damage to you while they're invulnerable is one of the worst feelings in the game, and then this just somehow adds that to normal mobs you experience in a map. All these, pretty much like anything that makes looting miserable or just turns off part of your characters that added in T17s, that these just kill your character in a way that feels like you got completely cheesed and just like makes you close the game in a way that almost no other mod does. It's just, these are just painful. If T17s are going to stick around in C16.5s, I think we could add additional mods, but just not ones that turn off your character or make looting terrible or killing mobs just feel terrible. It's just, there's too much pain in these. The loot is too good to not do them. And then there's too much pain, which just makes, overall, they just make the game less fun. Just I guess that's the end of my argument. It's just they're too good to not run. They make the game less fun, so you don't want to do them, but you feel enticed to do them. This is a very random one. Div cards in the campaign were completely gutted, like the drop rates. I don't know why that happened. I don't know why that middle finger in particular was raised to SSF players. I don't know if it was like a racing thing or what, but it used to be really common that you would want. Now, you wouldn't farm a Tabula Rasa in the campaign anymore anyway because Tabula Rasa sucks now, but essentially, you couldn't really do that anymore because you can't lower your level, and the div card drop rate is just so bad, and the campaign doesn't make sense. Like, I remember it used to be something you would consider farming, like either Tabula or Porcupine, but now you can't really do that, and it just wouldn't make sense to. I don't know if this is a change that was made to try to protect players from themselves. Like, they want you to get to maps because that's where more loot is anyway, but I think just having the option in SSF is one of the reasons it's fun. Like, you have the choice of what you target farm, so just removing one of those doesn't make a whole ton of sense to me. I don't want to talk about that one. And then here's like my gigahoop section of things that I don't think would be added, but I would absolutely love. I've wanted a target dummy in PoE for literally ever. The amount of time I've wasted in days walking to either like Aberath to test hit counts, test damage, or buying invitation sets. Like I've probably spent like multiple mirrors in standard of buying invitations just to test damage. I don't find that very fun. It just literally adds busy work for testing hit count of things or damage. I don't think this would get added, but it would just be really nice, in particular for me. It would save me a lot of my time. It's not fun time spent walking to Aberath to do a hit count, and then I dealt too much damage, he phased, and I have to go reset the instance and run back to him to test it again. So I would like to see generic cooldown recovery wheels added to the tree. I don't necessarily think these should get added. This is just, again, this section is things that I think would be awesome. Much like they have in PoE 2. These probably make way more sense in PoE 2 because so many things have a cooldown in that game because it's like a MMO basically. But here it probably makes less sense, although I would love it. I pretty much would like to see all the endgame farming strategies that were removed in 3.27 added back. Maybe not the Abyss stuff just because it was so powerful, but I don't know. It's more incentive to push your character to a certain point is really good for the game. It just adds more, like, I don't know, to the treadmill, I guess. I would not like to see risk scarabs come back, though, for what it's worth. I hated risk scarabs. I wouldn't even mind if risk scarabs were just removed entirely. I think they add an unfair restriction onto your character, or an unfun restriction on your character that restricts the meta in a way that's very, very unpleasant. I'd like to see Foulborn items go core. That would be awesome. I do think a lot of them need to be reworked. I would say probably about 80% of them are just bad and would have no use case, like things like the gold rim that gives you chaos res. And then I don't know, like Sybil's Paw, the one that gives you evasion to life on dot? I forget what it does. There's a lot that are just like not, well, I guess not memorable because they're just not strong enough. But some of them, like the mechanics of them, are interesting. It's just the numbers need to be tweaked. But like ones like the gold worm, it just like that doesn't have any use case. It's like you want more chaos rest while leveling, I guess. It's like that's not very fun. It's just like I don't know. I don't think we need leveling Foulborns, honestly, in general. I don't think there's enough for that, which is funny because the hoops are like a good version of that, where it's like they are leveling items, but they are usable in the end game, like the Falborn ones. This one, as someone who levels a lot, if Lily Roth worked like Scion, where like it was account bound, like you unlocked Lily Roth in Act 6 once, and then going forward, you're level 12, you can go to your hideout as a Marauder and go by Arc or something like that. That would be so sick to me. I could do beach to maps as much as I want, like actually levels what I want to play rather than my leveling skill. But I don't know if that's healthy for the game, honestly, just because then a lot of skills would just be completely unused, I assume. But still, because like some skills being like leveling only skills, like Rain of Arrows, are, I don't know, it's like kind of fine having stuff like skills like that. And then if something like that didn't happen, I would really love to see the level 1 to 28 skill gems just shuffled around like constantly. Basically, the leveling meta has been stagnant for so long, and this is more true for spells than other archetypes. Like other archetypes have like more options, like generic attacks. Like there are various things you can level as, but for spells you really have rolling magma, and then not a lot until level 28. Like you can do like Holy Flame Totem plus Flame Wall, and like a few other things like Stormblast Mines early, but I would just like to see gems that are available at level 1 move to 28, and then vice versa, just because it would change things. Like if Eye of Winter was like available early, but Rolling Magma was available at 28 and stuff like that. And then just like for other archetypes, it just I know that's not ideal for new players, so it's like maybe you keep some of the like available leveling skills around, but I think it's just way more fun to be able to either play as what you want as early as possible or play as something different that you haven't played before, where it's like I've probably spent like 1,000 hours playing Rolling Magma in the campaign at this point, and it's like, Jesus, I just want anything else as an option that deals a decent enough damage to justify it.